People say icing, icing, icing. Actually, what you want to do is nourish it, nourish it. Okay, how do we nourish it? Yeah, definitely. It's like when something's initially injured and swollen, ice is a great thing. Okay, so let's start with that. First 12 hours, first 24 hours after an injury, sure, ice it, because number one, it's great pain relief. But secondly, it does help with that excessive initial swelling that you sometimes get after an injury. But then that's kind of where everything kind of stops for me. So there are exceptions later, and I'll come back to them. But in general, you've got to think, what is that inflammation? Inflammation is the beginning of the healing process. Okay, so we get inflammation, I don't want to go down too much of the science, through proliferation, things start to kind of lay down, and then they remodel them, and then things, as you put more stress on them, then things start to align where we want them, and that's how we get a nice adapted tissue. Okay? But the beginning of that is inflammation. Okay, right? Brilliant. That's how we start healing. When it goes on forever and not so brilliant, but it's really useful. Okay? So that's the beginning point. Now, if you start to shut down the blood supply to that area, and that's what ice does. So it's called, it vasoconstricts. That means it closes the blood vessels. If you're doing that, you're actually limiting the chance of that tissue to heal. So you're limiting oxygenation of the tissues, and nutrients getting to those tissues. But you're also limiting waste products getting away from those tissues. Okay, and that actually can cause pain in itself, because that build-up of waste products sensitizes the nerve endings, and we start to heal. Right? So we're delaying healing and potentially increasing pain. Doesn't sound great to me. And yet people say, icing, icing, icing. Actually, what we want to do is nourish it, nourish it. Okay? How do we nourish it? Actually, movement, appropriate, safe movement. That's when we come in to advise on what is safe at the right times. Potentially heat, because that opens the blood vessels, supplies more of those nutrients we're talking about. And things like compression garments that support, prevent excessive build-up. But even dynamic compression garments, things like intermittent pneumatic compression, you can look that up. I want to continue more about that another time. There's a great company called Recovery Systems that have a really good product here. Yes. I'm not being paid to say that. It takes away old, stagnant blood with waste products, which creates a gradient. Then you get new fresh blood filling that oxygenated blood, which nourishes the area. So when it comes down to healing, what we want is stuff. We want new stuff, get rid of the old stuff. And that's what's going to improve that process. There are exceptions. So in my experience, acute pain, so something that's very, very, very painful, you want to block that. So ice can help do that very effectively. Secondly, there are certain structures. In my experience, fat pads, sometimes bursts, these kind of inert structures that they don't take load, they don't need to be healed necessarily, they just need to quieten down. These structures might benefit from ice. But the tendons, the muscles, the joints, they like heat, they like blood flow, and that allows movement. So, and the other time with ice is, if it reduces your pain to an extent that you can then start to move an area safely, then it's a benefit, because it's the movement that's going to facilitate the healing.
It's the movement that will move the blood as well.
Absolutely right, yeah. So as you move, you bring new blood flow to the area, you might bring synovial fluid that lubricates the joints. And I always say this to my patients, motion is lotion. And they always laugh, like you have. And it's great, something you can easily remember. So look, movement is good, static is bad.
Why do we initially have to ice?
So initially, that first 12 to 24 hours, often, number one, it's pain relief. Okay, no one likes to be in pain. And so we've got something that's non-pharmaceutical, with no side effects, that we can use, then, brilliant. So ice takes away that initial hit of pain. And the other thing is, often you do get very large, we call them effusions, of massive swellings initially, and they limit movement and they're painful and sensitize nerve endings and compress structures. It's not very nice. So that ice in that initial phase, I'm talking about 12-24 hours, can help reduce excessive, like someone real blowing up.
So it's kind of like a numbing agent.
It's like a numbing agent, but you know, think about it like this. You know, when you have an argument with someone, where you kind of fall, often you overreact initially in the moment. Okay, much like an injury. So you need some time out first before you start to then resolve that issue. Ice kind of gives you that time out.
Medically, other than that, it doesn't do anything for the injury.
As I said, it does reduce that initial big inflammatory reaction of it. But other than that, it doesn't do anything for the injury, no. Unless you're using ice with heat. So if you got ice heat, or cold hot, these are like these contrast baths, then it actually does seem to perpetuate blood flow, or actually increase blood flow, this opening and closing of the vessels. But ice on its own, no.
So basically, your recovery system, the movement, and your hot cold, they're all basically concepts to move blood.
Essentially, same as an infrared, a laser, all these kind of things. They're all to help to facilitate getting rid of waste products that sensitize nerve endings and cause pain, and bring in new, fresh blood. Essentially, that's what healing, the beginning of healing, comes down to.
Because it's all the nutrients are in the blood.
Yeah, they're there. As long as you're eating a decent diet. I'm Matthew Winter. I'm a physiotherapist, director of Integrative Physio, which is a clinic that I set up about 5 years ago in order that we look at the whole patient. So I really wanted to get to the root of what was going on with patients, understanding that it's not always structural, and there are other things involved in pain and in leading to injuries as well. So I wanted to look not just at the pathology or what was going on, the straw that broke the camel's back, but also the biomechanics of the patient, the world around them, their environment, their habits, their training, their belief systems, and even their nutrition. So it was really about taking a 360-degree view of patients in order that we get back to where things started going on. I worked in Singapore for about 11 years now, and I trained in the UK at Nottingham. I worked at Tan Tock Seng, did my rotations there, and in elite sport and national sport, and work a lot in medical education, dealing with pre-hospital injuries, pre-hospital emergencies, and that's my other kind of passion. So I guess sports injuries, pain management, and then pre-hospital care.